All right, welcome to another episode of Guru Fantasy World. I am your host, David Gautieri. We are having another great guest for the last episode of the off season. You could argue best for last. First time guest, very much appreciate you for coming on. Dwain McFarland, welcome to the show of Fantasy Life. Does all the utilization report stuff there, rookie supermodel, all the preseason takeaways. First off, thank you for coming on. Second off, before we get to the fantasy stuff, can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you're coming from, your background, kind of what you're doing over at Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life team over there?
Sure. Yeah. Number one, thanks for having me on. I know you're a grinder, David. Like, you get after this stuff. So I always appreciate coming on with someone that I know is really, diving into the research. Like, I know you're always trying to look for the edges and you're seeing what things matter, what things don't matter. And that's really my process. Is I really try to follow a data driven process. I still watch the players. I still want to see what's going on in the games, but I use a lot of like data to kind of filter things down to what do I really feel like I need to go watch? What are the things that maybe, or things that I think the data has blind spots in, and I may focus more of my time if I'm going to be watching players like on things like that, or something where, man, the data says this, but it doesn't really match up with the way the public feels, and so do I need to go watch this player, or do I need to research this thing more? But as far as, my background, like, man, I've always just kind of been into that sort of thing, like even since I was a kid, man. Like, back in the day, I'm older than you, so back in the day when I would play video games, like when the first video games I played, like Tecmo Bowl and even baseball games back in the day, like they didn't keep stats for your season, so I would literally write them all down in my little notebook, my stats for my players for each week, and I would see like my totals for the season and all that. And finally the games progressed where they kept track of all that for you, but I was always doing nerdy stuff like that, where I was just always, I always loved numbers. I was always researching numbers. I didn't necessarily know what I was researching when I was younger, but I mean, I always knew all the stats and data and I used to watch baseball a lot more. Like, as I've gotten older and had kids, like I didn't have time for every sport, and football was always my first passion. That's from, hanging out with my dad on Sundays and watching football. And I was just always fascinated, David, by like how my dad he would know when there was holding when I wouldn't. He would say, they need to use play action here. Like, I'm talking mid 90s. Like, I always tell my dad now, I was like, Dad, you were so ahead of your time. Like, all these analytics and stuff talk about the things teams should be doing more, and like the easy buttons and offenses and stuff like that. And I was like, you were calling out these things, like whenever, this is like 30 years ago on some of this stuff. I was like, you were just really like, you're a savant and you didn't even know it. And he just laughs about it. Mostly now he just gets mad at the Cowboys, because like I live in Texas, and so I was raised a Cowboys fan, and I really got hooked because whenever I first started watching, the Cowboys just started winning Super Bowls. My first season to watch them, they were terrible. The next year they drafted Troy Aikman that year. The next year, they got a little bit better. Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones had bought the Cowboys. Jimmy Johnson was now the head coach. They had Michael Irvin on the team. Then they draft Emmitt Smith. And then like the offensive line gets really good. Then they trade for Charles Haley. So like I was just in this, I mean, I had no chance, honestly, like, because the Cowboys were so good at that time. Like, football became like this huge focus for me early on. So it's kind of like it's like all those things coming together. And originally my degree is actually in education. I was going to be a football coach. I was never that great in football, for the record, as far as being a player. So people that want to say, man, you were probably never good at football. Yes, you're correct. But I don't think that means that you can't study the game and that you can't learn it. I did try to play. I just had a home league draft 2 weeks ago with a guy that was really good that we still hang out. He's from high school. He broke my collarbone in a scrimmage game. We were playing against another team, and he was a safety and I was a safety, and I was coming around the line from behind the line of scrimmage, chasing a running back, and the running back's now heading upfield. He falls down. My buddy Jason, he was playing deep safety. He's coming down, and as the running back falls, his helmet hits right into my collarbone and cracks it. And so we still joke about that to this day. I was like, you are a way better football player than me. I was like, but I think I got you in fantasy. Actually, he's a really good fantasy football player too. So it's like, I've just always loved the game. I've always loved the data. I was so passionate about it. I thought I would end up being a coach. I ended up going down a different path on it, just I mean, this may sound bad, but it was for money. Like I got into sales out of college because I had like 6 months to wait for my first coaching job, and like started making really good money. And then it was like, oh man, like can I give away this money to go back to coaching? And ultimately that led though, I worked in medical device and pharmaceutical sales, and then that led to this job at a company that was looking for someone to come in and help with their products that they wanted to sell to hospitals that help them better negotiate with with the reps, like is what I was. And I was a regional manager at the time at the company I was with. And I loved data. And then I also knew like the tricks that these reps would use with the hospitals to get better pricing and stuff for them. And I was like, oh man, like this is a perfect fit. I get to work with data. And so then I really got back into my data mode, started learning a lot about analytics. Like I don't have a degree in analytics. I don't have a degree in math or anything like that. I just honestly was right place, right time kind of scenario in that job. And I had a really great team around me. I had like mathematicians and all these people I could learn from and apply all these different concepts. And so I just started applying them to something I was already doing, which was playing fantasy football. And I just started looking at it through, I'd always looked at it through a statistical and data lens, but now I had a much better understanding of how to maybe better research it, the right kind of questions to ask, to delve deeper. And so, sometimes these journeys that you're on like lead to this perfect spot. Like I loved teaching. So there's this educational aspect to what we do. And then, I also did sales. You have to be able to promote your stuff. So like that kind of fit in. And then later in life, I got to get back to the analytics side and learn all these different skills where I led a product and strategy team, for multiple years in the healthcare arena. And like it just all came together, man. And PFF came to me one day and I was just doing it as a side gig. And honestly didn't know, man, that this would ever be my full-time role because, like the roles pay way better now. And that changed things. But there's still a lot of people working for almost nothing. And so I had to grind like as a side gig for a long time. And eventually there was an offer where it was less than my corporate gig. But my wife was like, you have to take it, though. You have to go ahead and take your shot now and see how it turns out. And now I'm with Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life, and I'm the director of analytics there. And I also just, I'm like you, man. I'm trying to churn out as much actionable information as I can and synthesize it in a way that hopefully people can take it and use it to dominate their drafts and pick up the right free agents and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, still a diehard Cowboys fan.
Yeah, but fantasy helps offset that. Yeah. So the Cowboys got really bad really quickly after those 3 Super Bowls, and I honestly needed a coping mechanism. And so fantasy football helped me with that. I was like, I can't control what Jerry Jones and the team is going to do, but I can control my fantasy team. I can control like the roster moves and stuff I do there. And I loved it, and I was pretty good at it early on. Like I would just see certain things that like other people wouldn't see, even though I hadn't like really honed my skill set yet. But it was just like kept me just striving to want to get better and better. It's kind of like I play guitar too. It's something where you're never done getting better. You're just always trying to figure out, okay, how might I improve it a little bit? What are my blind spots? What are the things that I'm weak at that I need to think through? And I think another big thing in the space is like people like you are included in this, but there's so many bright minds in the space. And I think all the different formats we play, like open up all these avenues, because now we have all these new people that are playing it because they love best ball. You have Dynasty. Like I learned so much through Dynasty about really recalibrating the way I thought about rookies, the way I recalibrated thinking. You mentioned, I've got the rookie supermodel over at Fantasy Life. And so really trying to figure out like, how do you better understand talent coming out of college? And like, that became a really big thing for me. And it's something I constantly work on, every off season. But then roster construction, like the way I thought about roster construction previous to best ball was a little bit different. And so all this research and stuff from all these great people out there, that's the other thing. I'm constantly, looking to learn from others, which I think is a really beautiful thing about fantasy right now in the space that we're in. While it can be a little bit toxic at times, overall, like I think it's very positive just because of all of the bright minds, from across like all shapes and sizes of life, young people getting into it later. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, and one thing you brought up that I think really is what makes the game so addictive is talk about you can always get better. Like we talk about the best fantasy players in this space, and what percentage of their player takes are they getting right to even be considered? 60%. That's probably a good year.
That's really good. Yeah.
And you still have 40% that you just got wrong. So every year, no matter how much we get right, we're going to have just a handful of things that we get wrong and that we're going to be able to look back on and say, why did I get this wrong? How did I get this wrong? What do I do differently going forward?
On that point, like something I've spent a massive amount of time the last 2 years is getting better and understanding how to better think about ceiling and floor and how to project those things, and then thinking about how much do those things matter. And a lot of it does come back down to like the price, like you get these players at, what's their average draft position? Like that's such a huge part of the equation. And every site is a little bit different. Roster setups change supply and demand and the way you might think about when you should take certain, position groups. And also every year is a little bit different, like, and where like the sweet spots are for value and drafts. Like there's a lot of overlap, I would say, each year, but there are just these slight variables. And one of the things, in my opinion, to setting up like a really good draft strategy is to kind of work backwards to front. And you're trying to figure out where are the pockets of value where I might be able to get something later that's very similar to players that are going earlier in a draft. And if you can figure those things out, and it can't be all centered around one player, right? If you were like, I got this one guy that could be at number one, like you said, you could still be wrong. There's a range of outcomes on these players.
I'm drafting Emeka Ibuka. Oh, wait, everybody is.
Exactly. And don't be wrong, there's players we want to be overweight on, but like the second part of that, is also just like what is that range of outcomes really on that player, and I just, so that's something I've really been trying to hone in on. Like we've hired a data scientist over at Fantasy Life, a young guy named Alex. He's super sharp. So I'm always trying to take him ideas and get him to test things that I've already tested, look at it through a different lens, see if maybe I've got a blind spot, or maybe we just make something I have even better, more actionable, that kind of stuff. So that's a huge, huge thing for me. And like I said, I'm good at math, but I'm not a mathematician. Like I am not someone super deep in the weeds of math. So we also have another guy that I work with all the time. His name's James McCool. He runs Pay Dirt Sports. You guys may have heard of him. Like he puts out a ton of great DFS content. Like a lot of people that play on Pay Dirt win a lot of money in DFS. Like, so he's a contrarian thinker, like he's a mathematician. So like working with him on these things around ceiling and floor and how do we think about them and how do we accurately, more accurately project what a realistic range of outcomes are on players. Like that's been a massive focus for me over the last 2 years.
So can you talk a little bit about more, because I put it on the show sheet, the most vague bullet point, like basically talk about your projections process. So you talk about you projecting a range. Is that something that you're doing when you're doing a projections process, or are you kind of projecting a single number and then just kind of eyeballing what you think the range could be, or are you actually projecting ranges for players?
Yeah, so I'm doing both, but what I'm trying to do now that we've got this process around ceiling and floor, I'm really trying to do the best I can to project a median outcome. And what that means a lot of times is the projection I will have on a player will be lower than what their ADP suggests. And because I'm trying to be realistic, like a perfect example, I know we're going to talk about TreVeyon Henderson, but like when I project him, I don't just get so hyped about TreVeyon that I project him for 60% of the carries just because like I'm so sure he's just going to take over all this work from Ramondre Stevenson. I have it projected more as the data that we have, which is based on training camp reports, based on what we've seen in the preseason. He's probably going to share time at least to start the year. And so for a median projection, I'm projecting a split backfield for TreVeyon Henderson as well as Ramondre Stevenson. But I'm giving Ramondre a slight edge in the early down work. I'm giving Ramondre the pass protection work on long down and distance. So it's 3rd and 7. The defense knows you have to pass. So the coach wants the better blocker on the field because most likely they're there to block. They're not going to catch a pass. And if they do, it's probably not a first down. So it's not really what the offense wants to do in that scenario. So I'm projecting out these smaller components of the role. And then ultimately, that still leaves room, though, for TreVeyon Henderson to get a lot of passes on 1st and 2nd down. And think about it. Like there's like over the last 3 years, there's 80,000 1st and 10 snaps versus 3rd or 4th and long. at 15,000. So there's just way more of those plays, number one. So we don't need to get overly worried about those third and fourth and long situations. And then number two, fantasy points per snap on those plays is 0.20 versus 0.35 on first and second down. So I'm also given TreVeyon the 2-minute offense. That's a whole different scenario, because what's the defense trying to do? They just want to stop a big play. They do not want to give a big play that lets a team back in the game or let a team score a touchdown right at halftime. And so what does that mean? That means the defense is actually asking the offense to throw the ball to the running back. So what does the offensive coordinator know about that situation? Most likely, TreVeyon's not going to be blocking. He's going to be running pass routes because they're just going to be dropping into coverage. You're also in a hurry up offense. There's less time for the defense to set up exotic blitzes. So it's really nuanced. So TreVeyon, I have getting, a little bit more of the pass down work than Rhamondre, a little bit more of the earlier down work to Rhamondre. But then that median gets ran through a range of outcomes, which is we could just flat out be wrong about the role we have TreVeyon projected for, and it handles a lower version of that. But it also then projects, well, what if he did take over more of this work? And that's what really comes into the ceiling and floor model. And it's really based off of the variance that we've seen over the last 5 years, based off of the things that drive fantasy points: receptions, yards, touchdowns. And obviously some of those categories have a much wider range of outcomes. So like receiving touchdowns for a running back is very high variance. Rushing yards for a running back, less variance in what we're going to see, from their median to their ceiling and their floor. So that really all gets processed in. So I'm really trying to project the median outcome the best I can. And we're still going to get those things wrong. Like the Patriots could come out in week 1 and do a complete unveil where TreVeyon gets 65% of the snaps, or it could be 30. We really don't know. So I'm trying to project more down the middle and let the variance model handle the rest.
Dwain, what would you say if I told you that your projections are wrong about TreVeyon Henderson, that even you are too low on him? Because you talk about one thing at first, you talked about the third and long downs with the pass blocking, and they're going to want to prefer the better pass blocker. I would argue there's a good chance that is TreVeyon Henderson. We look at his pass blocking. PFF has him never allowing a sack in pass protection at Ohio State. He had a 70-plus PFF pass blocking grade twice. So, I mean, I don't have Rhamondre stuff off the top of my head. I'll have to look into that. But I would say there's a good chance TreVeyon Henderson gets those right away. And then you talk about the things that could go right. I'm not a guy who's big into projecting fumbles. Like we talk about the variance. There's a big variance on fumbles year over year. The guy who's fumbled last year, not necessarily the guys who are going to fumble the next year. But Rhamondre Stevenson did lead running backs in fumbles last year.
Yep.
TreVeyon Henderson had 1 fumble in his entire collegiate career, and it was as a freshman. So he hasn't had a fumble in like three years. So I think we could see him get that early down work. I think if somehow somebody ends up in the doghouse, it's Rhamondre. So what that leads,
and he's hurt to start the season. So no, you're right. And so again, though, I am a little more conservative. It's not that I don't have TreVeyon playing any of the long down and distance snaps. I do have him playing some of them, but I have them giving a preference to Stevenson, like we've just seen it with veteran backs. But it very easily could be wrong. The beauty of it is that's the least important role for a running back, playing those long down and distance, because typically they are blocking. They're not going to get a target on those plays. There are scenarios where backs get more, and typically it's on an offense where they don't have a really good number 2 wide receiver, which the Patriots also kind of fit. So you could see more targets to the backs on long down and distance. And so if I were to get TreVeyon wrong in that capacity, yes, he could have more of a ceiling. But the beauty of it is the way the variance model works, it kind of handles all that for me. But to your point, if I start off with the wrong median projection, it is going to ultimately impact the ceiling, for TreVeyon Henderson. So here's the good news. TreVeyon Henderson, even the way I have him set up, splitting this, the thing people have to understand, his PPR ceiling comes out at over 20 fantasy points per game. So that tells you the type of player that, as a rookie, that's going to be a running back 1, guys. The average fantasy points per game for a top 12 running back going back to 2011 is around 16.5. So he would be well above that. If you play in a smaller league than that, obviously, like if you're an 8-teamer, like that number's a little bit higher to be qualified as quote unquote a running back one. But to your point, yeah, if I get those things wrong, and it happens every year. Like I go back and look at my projection process every year and see, what did I get right? What did I get wrong? What are the things I'm more likely to get wrong than right? And it's every year there are things just like the thing you mentioned.
Yeah, and I'm kind of torn because I'm a Ramondre Stevenson truther in recovery, where I still believe like this guy was a highly graded rusher. He was top 12 in yards after contact in his first 3 seasons. He's a guy who has shown receiving ability. So I do think Ramondre's going to have a role, but you also talk about the Pats not having a number 2 receiver. I don't know that they even have a number 1 wide receiver. We'll see about Stephon
It's questionable.
Diggs.
You're right.
But this offense could be funneled through both TreVeyon and Ramondre, and it could be a 2 running back offense. And I do think they have the potential, depending how good Drake May is, to be an average to above average scoring offense in terms of yardage, in terms of touchdowns. So I think the upside is very high there, which kind of leads me to my next question. Are we taking TreVeyon over Omarion and Hampton? Even though I'm pretty sure the projections will have Omarion and Hampton scoring more than TreVeyon and Henderson. Are we leaning towards the ceiling outcome for TreVeyon versus the projectable volume for Omarion? Talk about those two.
Yeah, so I mean, the thing with Omarion, like his ceiling is 20.6, and actually TreVeyon's is right at 20, just under 21. So they're the same, right? And where they're coming out. Now Omarion's got a slightly better median projection right now than TreVeyon Henderson, and part of that's due to just Najee Harris hasn't been able to practice. So even if he's ready week 1, like Hampton's just had such a opportunity to establish himself, right, with the Chargers. But like that doesn't guarantee that's going to be right, because by week 4, maybe, there is a scenario where they want to use more Najee Harris and work him in more. But the way I look at those two is this. They're a major part of my draft strategy. Folks can check it out for free over at fantasylife.com. I've been working on stuff since February, researching everything I can, rookies, the way data works, yada, 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 doing projections, doing the floor ceiling work, creating tiers. The beauty is you can get both in your fantasy draft. And if you're drafting in home leagues, Omarion's going to go in round 3 and TreVeyon's going to go in round 4. He's really going in round 5. I don't trust it, though. Like, you don't want to get sniped on him. So it just opens you up if you want to take, especially if you're drafting like from the middle draft position, depending on the site. Like you come away with CD Lamb, you're in a full PPR, and then coming back down, you get Drake London. And then you could turn around and go Omarion and TreVeyon. So I think that's the other aspect that I try to think through is like, well, how do we maximize it? And I know that Hampton's going to go earlier in drafts. So I want to go ahead and take him first and give myself a chance to have both of them on my team. Because if I take TreVeyon first, I'm not getting Omarion Hampton coming back to me in round 4 in redraft. He's going to be gone from the board. So that's the other like little thing that's in play. But like if it was if you're in a vacuum and you're having to pick between the two, like say if you're in a dynasty league, like I have them exactly neck and neck. I do think that it's a coin flip between the two, both graded out really well in the rookie supermodel. I mean, we're talking about super high hit rates on these guys as far as notching a running back 1 performance by their 3rd season in the league. So I think it really comes down to what you want. If you asked me to paint the highest ceiling, though, if everything went right, I think it's TreVeyon Henderson.
Yeah, I would agree there. And this isn't on the show sheet, but one question I would have would be like, how do you evaluate these guys versus, say, a veteran like Alvin Kamara, where the median projection is going to be higher, but also you're looking at the skew versus first half of the season, second half of the season. What happens if the Saints fall out of the picture? Like, how do you balance that? Do you tend to gravitate towards the guys in the second half, like the rookies, or would you tend to gravitate towards a guy like Alvin Kamara, who probably has a higher median and a similar ceiling projection?
Yeah, I gravitate to the younger players that I think are going to be doing it for me in the second half. And I think you already hit on a real key. Like the Saints, we don't even know who the starting quarterback is. Regardless of which one it is, it's probably not going to be great. Now, I think there are values on Saints in drafts this year. I don't particularly think that Alvin Kamara is one of them in home leagues. If you go play on sites like Real Time Sports, where you can play in the Fantasy Life Championship, you go play over at FFPC, go play over at some of these other sites, people are going to be more aggressive on the young guys. But in your home league, a lot of people will still take Kamara a little bit too early. And I mean, I've seen Alvin Kamara go in round 3 over at Real Time Sports. Like, I don't want that because of the risk you talked about. Like, what if the Saints are shut? We already saw it last year. Like, the coaching staff basically said Kamara could have come back and played, but they just didn't want to. What was the point? Like, the season was over. And I think there's a lot of risk with Kamara. Number one, the age. Number two, the team and the chance of them shutting him down. Having said all that, he does have the one trait that helps running backs age better than any other, and that's the fact that the dude gets targeted so much. It's insane. And if you go back and look at the first of last year, like, the Saints obviously were good to start the season, and then everything fell apart with injuries to the offensive line, all the receivers. Derek Carr was in and out of the lineup, playing hurt. Like, a lot of things went wrong. And Kamara still, through those games, was a guy average in PPR leagues, averaging, 17, 18 fantasy points per game. So I'm not completely out on him. I'm out on him at the price when he goes, where he goes in a lot of fantasy drafts. If round 4, I got to pick between him and TreVeyon, I'm going to lean to the younger player because of what you said. I think that TreVeyon, I'm more likely to look up at the end of the year and say, wow, this guy completely smashed my league in a way that just left my league mates scratching their heads. I don't see that I think the chances are less with Kamara. I think you'll like him early in the season. I think early you're going to be like, man, I can't believe people let me get Alvin, Kamara in this range of the draft. What were people doing? I think that's total. I think that's going to happen. Like, that's actually going to happen. But I do worry about the second half of the season.
So I'm going to throw one more at you, which is a little bit more of the same age range, because in that group where we have that ADP range, we have Hampton, we have TreVeyon Henderson going a little bit after. We also have a guy who is basically my flag plant at running back, which would be Kenneth Walker, who is much more in that age range of Hampton and Henderson. Can you talk about your thoughts on his projections versus those rookies and how you would order those 3 running backs?
Yeah, so I really like Kenneth Walker. If folks check out the draft strategy guide, where I just kind of synthesize all this stuff I've done down into like just a quick list for you, I really think the value at running backs is rounds 2 through 5. When I say 2, it's because you can get Bucky Irving and some guys like that. But really, in round 3, you can get Hampton. Round 4 to 5, you can get TreVeyon Henderson, Kenneth Walker, and then RJ Harvey, right, also goes in that range, who's a similar player to TreVeyon Henderson. Not the same prospect, but some of the same traits in an offense where we know he's going to get the targets. But Kenneth Walker is a guy that I really do like. And he showed that he can play in the 2-minute offense. He showed that he can play across all the downs. When he is getting that primary role as far as the early down workload, which I do believe he's set up for again this year, like, he has a chance to be a very special player, like, with his traits. I also really like the scheme fit this year when we're moving over to Clint Kubiak, using more of that zone type blocking scheme where he can use that, that one jump cut, immediate acceleration ability. That really fits his skill set, right? Versus just having to handle a gap scheme where, it's basically you're following what's in front of you. You try to manipulate the linebacker on the other side, and then you're doing your thing. So I like the scheme fit. I like what we've seen from Kenneth Walker. I think folks, he really did push up boards, and this stuff around the foot has really caused people to start fading him. They're not fading him, but he's fallen from being a round 4 pick to a lot of times I'll see him going round 5 now of fantasy drafts. And man, like, I love clicking on him. So my strategy this year is, because of this sweet spot at running back, I love coming away with 2 to 3 of, Omarion Hampton, TreVeyon Henderson, Kenneth Walker, RJ Harvey. I really love that range of the draft.
Yeah, and I love the confirmation bias, because we had Ryan Heath on a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about his Anatomy of a League Winner article. And we look at the first 2 rounds, running backs and wide receivers, you're getting about a 20% league winner rate for the first 2 rounds at both positions. But then we look at rounds 3 and 4, you're maintaining that 20% hit rate at running back, but it drops to 5 and 11% in round 3 and 4 at wide receiver. So you really want to be drafting the running backs in round 3 and 4, and ideally having your wide receiver anchor in the first 2 rounds. So I love hearing you say that you want to draft those running backs in that round 3-4 range, and even round 5 range. And I want to keep this conversation, this topic going just a little longer on a follow up, because you skipped right over one guy who's in that ADP range. You went right to Harvey, and you skipped over Breece Hall. So talk about Breece Hall and maybe why you weren't including him in that conversation, because I mean, Harvey's a guy who I like the receiving upside. Denver was 4th in running back targets last year. Breece Hall is a guy who is becoming a hot topic of debate. To me, I still see that 70-plus reception upside where we talk about he's probably going to be the number 2 target on this team. So tell me why you didn't mention him in that conversation.
I just didn't name everybody, but Breece Hall's fine. He's in the conversation, and he's getting cheaper and cheaper. People are so worried about Braylon Allen at this point. You've got, Hall falling to round 5. But he is the archetype we want. He is the guy that's shown he can handle all the passing down work. He is a guy that's shown he can be effective inside the 5-yard line if you get away from small samples. He's shown a guy that can break the big plays. I've seen a lot of stuff out there about how he wasn't explosive last year. That's just not true. If you look at his explosive rush rate, carries of 10-plus yards or more, he was one of the better backs in the league last year, well above the NFL average of 9.5%. So he checks the boxes. The one other question mark with him, right, is how bad his offensive environment could be. Now, having said that, I still don't think it's going to necessarily hamper his targets. Number one, we have heard the coaching staff say he's going to be the passing down back. Number two, Garrett Wilson's really all they have. Like, we hope Mason Taylor's a good tight end, but we don't know. The wide receiver 2, they don't have one. Like, I mean, okay, Josh Reynolds, are you kidding? Like, he's not going to get targets. Oh, you want to put Alan Lazard in? He's not going to earn a lot of targets. So historically speaking, some of these guys that can run into some massive, massive target seasons, even without being good pass catchers, are when you only have one good receiver on the team. And so the quarterback's dropping back. The first read is that receiver. It's covered. And their second read is not good. Like, it's a person that's not open, or they can't win at the point of attack. There's a reason these guys have never really shown they can be target earners in the league, and we shouldn't expect them to suddenly change. So that dynamic alone puts Breece Hall in a scenario where he could be the number 2 target on the Jets this year. And so I do agree with you on the receiving upside that's there for Hall. The main thing he needs to avoid is somehow Braylon Allen sniping the carries inside the 5-yard line. And the thing is, we don't know for sure, but the range of outcomes for Breece Hall, like, he has a really good median and a really good floor and a really high ceiling because he checks all the different boxes. So even if he doesn't run pure, I don't know how many drafts you've been doing. Like, you've probably drafted several teams over the last, week.
But I'm over 600 best ball drafts. I've been
there you go. So
quite a few.
so round 5 he's falling into now, man. And so, like, I'm taking Breece Hall every time. When Breece Hall was going at the end of round 3, I was taking him. Then he was in round 4 and I was taking him. And now you're telling me in round 4 was tougher because I was like, okay, do I want TreVeyon? Do I want Breece Hall? Do I want Kenneth Walker? I was leaning a little bit more to TreVeyon and Kenneth Walker, but now it's at the point where it's like, okay, Breece Hall in round 5, like, yes, give me that because he checks the boxes that we want.
Yeah, especially you can start 2 wide receivers, an elite quarterback in George Kittle, and then get Breece Hall in round 5 as your running back anchor. I'm all in on that price. Like you said, like, he's now falling behind Kenneth Walker and ADPs, behind TreVeyon Henderson. Like, he's like priced next to Chuba Hubbard, who's like caught as many passes in his entire collegiate and NFL career as Breece Hall's caught in one season. So I think the ceiling case is just much higher. For a round 5 pick, that's a smash to me. So I'm glad to hear you say that. All right, we're going to move on from the running back because I carried that one a little long there.
It's a great topic. It's a really important topic because I think it especially this year with the running backs you're getting in that range. We're not talking about, I mean, all these players we just mentioned, another key is they're all in their prime. These are guys that are all still ascending
minus
talents.
Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, but Kamara, we already mentioned it. that he's old, and he's not necessarily one of the guys that we're actively targeting, right? These other guys that we talked about that wrapping really your draft strategy around, they're all young ascending players.
These are not dead zone picks at all. These
Right.
the running backs have been priced down over the years, where it's really hard to pass on these middle round guys. To me, now you're not drafting Mike Davis in round 5; you're drafting
Exactly.
Breece Hall. So it's just a completely different conversation than the past. So I want to talk a little bit about your perfect draft article, right? Because I was reading through it a little bit, the perfect draft strategy. And at the top, when you're kind of giving these lists of players and pockets of players you want to target, at the tight end position, you have a note. And this is music to my ears, as I've been a Tyler Warren truther, all pounding the drum all off season since rookie draft season, when people said this guy was no good because he didn't produce go crazy till his 5th year. I've been pounding the drum, and now here you are putting a note in your perfect draft guide that says Tyler Warren is the Jayden Daniels of tight ends this year, making it the position I am more willing to wait on. Tell me more about that. For one, tell me about why Tyler Warren is such a cheat code that you would compare him to Jayden Daniels. And number 2, tell me why I should draft him over David Njoku, because I really like David Njoku this year. We talk about what he did with Joe Flacco, 18.2 points per game in his 5 games with Flacco in 2023. Like, I'm struggling because I love Njoku in that range. I love Warren, and it's more of like a front half for a second half. Is that what it boils down to? I should be taking Tyler Warren. Sell me on him.
Yeah, so David Njoku is also in the article, so I think you brought up another really good name. So like there's a little sweet spot for the tight ends, and again, I talked about earlier, to have a perfect draft strategy, you can't completely center it around Tyler Warren. He's the guy I really wanted to highlight for people, but he could get taken. So you need to have a few guys that you feel really comfortable about at tight end to go with the strategy, and David Njoku is one of the other names. And the genesis, part 1 of this, like of the Jayden Daniels of tight ends, is last year, one of the keys to my draft strategy was waiting and passing the dual threat quarterbacks because you could get Jayden Daniels in round 8 or 9 of your draft. And I talked about the opportunity for him to really help you offset, the guys that were going much higher, rounds 2, round 3. This year, we don't have a prospect like Jayden Daniels going in that range of drafts. We have guys we like at quarterback. We could talk about Drake May. We can talk about Caleb Williams. We can talk about even Justin Fields, like, to an extent, but none of them offer the ceiling that Jayden Daniels offered as a passer and as a rusher, right? A guy that can run for 800 yards, throw for over 4,000. God only made so many of those, right? And most of them are going in the first 4 rounds. This year, I don't have someone I'm as confident at the quarterback position. So what does that mean? That means if I'm going to take an elite onesie in round 3 of my fantasy draft this year, I'm probably going to make it the quarterback. But the other part of the equation is Tyler Warren sitting here. And so the best thing I can tell people to think about, and I don't want them to think I'm saying he is Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers truly was, this word gets overused, but he was a generational prospect. Brock Bowers was as a tight end. Tyler Warren grades out a little bit lower than him in the rookie supermodel, but still, one of the top 5 guys in the supermodel since 2018. And when you look at him, it's also part of the fit here, right? And so when you look at Shane Steichen, very RPO heavy scheme system. Past 2 years, the Colts rank number 1 in RPO rate. 22% of their dropbacks have been RPOs. You look at their quarterbacks. We know Daniel Jones is the starter right now. Anthony Richardson could be the starter at some point, but what do they both have? They both have that dual threat ability that keeps that RPO game alive, because for the RPO to really work, you need a gravitational pull that threatens the defense to think that the quarterback could run this. And then they have to respect that. And then that's what creates the space for the wide receivers or the tight ends to get a little bit more room to work with and creates these easy targets. The other thing, Shane Steichen's offense ranks number 4 in play action rate, which is one of the biggest cheat codes for tight ends if you look at fantasy points per target or fantasy points per route run over the last 3 years of data. And then you put that together with Tyler Warren's profile. What was Tyler Warren so amazing at in college? He is so great getting the ball somewhere around the line of scrimmage and then letting him do his, thing after the catch. I mean, the guy wears John Riggins' number, for crying out loud. You guys that don't know who John Riggins is, go back, look it up. He was with, I know you can't say this now, but it was the Washington Redskins. You can call them the Commanders now, but back in the day, Higgins was just this brute. And that's the style really that you get with Tyler Warren. So what I see here is a player that is going to get all of this stuff schemed up right around the line of scrimmage. He's going to be the closest guy to the quarterback on these plays. And so he's going to be a massive part of it. Also, this matches what we've been hearing from camp. It also matches what we saw in preseason utilization. This dude's going to, I don't think you're going to have to wait. This guy's going to be an 80% route participation tight end right out of the gate. He's going to be a full-time player. I think he could actually lead the Colts in receptions this year. I don't have it necessarily projected that way, but again, going back to the ceiling and floor, it's really just massive here for Warren. And the one last thing I would say is you just have to lean into the fact, two things. His ADP is low, right? This is a guy that, like, if you look right now over on Fantasy Life at our ADP tool and you look at the consensus, right, and which looks across ESPN, Sleeper, Yahoo, CBS, Real Time Sports, Underdog, FFPC, all these different leagues. Tyler Warren is coming off the board at pick 102. Now, you got to look at your league and the site you're playing on to see where you're getting him. So the price is really good. It's kind of in the range of where Jayden Daniels was last year. And then I think the other thing, we just have to remember, man, that talent, especially when you're getting it that cheap, it's the trump card. Last year, people let Brock Bowers fall to that range of their drafts. Why? Man, he's not going to get targets with Devontae Adams. He's going to have to share time with Michael Mayer. There's Jacoby Myers that's also there. Oh, man, their quarterbacks suck. Aiden O'Connell sucks. All those things were true for Brock Bowers. And he was still an amazing tight end last year because he's a really good player. And when things break right for a really good player like they did, Devontae Adams gets traded. The quarterback situation was still terrible. And Brock Bowers ends up smashing in fantasy. So there's just, I think that Tyler Warren has a chance to be the number one target on his team, period. Number two, there's contingency upside. Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, both have battled injuries, each of them over the last 2 years. So you got health stuff. Adonai Mitchell we like. There's some traits we like, but not been able to really get on the field. So I think it's a very similar situation. Not quite the same talent profile that we had with Bowers, but whenever you factor in the scheme and why they handpicked this player, I think he's going to get a lot of targets right out of the gate. And again, we've seen it already in preseason. This dude just getting peppered.
Yeah, I think he's got a little bit of that TreVeyon Henderson to him, where you talk about, all right, he's got this 5th round ADP, you got to take him in the 4th. Warren's probably going to go 9th round in your mocks, but you're gonna have to draft him in the 8th round if you actually want him on your team.
And that's where I put him in the strategy guide. Yeah. I'm like, just take him in the 8th.
Yeah, take him in the 8th. And I agree. We talked about already the preseason usage, where 20 out of 20 snaps the first game, 14 out of 15 snaps the second game. This guy's not coming off the field. Talk about comparing him to Brock Bowers, right? I also agree Brock Bowers tier of his own, truly generational prospect. But Brock Bowers broke the power conference record for single season yardage by tight ends, 1,051 yards. That was really good what Brock Bowers did in college. Tyler Warren came out and he broke that record for power conference by 400 yards, but of 1,451 yards. You talk about the tackle breaking ability, the ability with this ball in his hands. You make the John Riggins comp. Maybe for the listeners who are more in my age range and not Dwayne's, we'll say Mike Allstott if he was 6'6", 260, But this guy is just an absolute bulldozer with the ball in his hands. He had 30 missed tackles forced in his final season at Penn State. That's more than Brock Bowers ever put up in a season, more than Sam Laporta, who was this elite tackle breaker in college, ever put up in a season. So we see the yak ability, the ability with the ball in his hands, the scheme fit you talk about. I think he's getting 60, at minimum 60 receptions, and you can easily.
He's my tight end 6.
Yeah, you can push him into the 70, 80 receptions as a rookie is very well within reach, is very well attainable. I see a lot of people saying, I won't wait and target Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland. To me, that's not even it's Tyler Warren. I would say is at least 50-50 chance he's the number one in receptions on the team. Colston Loveland, I say 50-50 chance he's the number 4 target in Chicago. And maybe a little bit better to be the number 3 target, but I don't see him as a top 2 target. Certainly don't see him as the number 1 target. To me, Colston Loveland, I don't want to wait and take him. I want to reach in round 8, get Njoku, get Tyler Warren. Maybe I would rather Tucker Kraft than Colston Loveland.
And here's the other thing I'll say that's interesting. Even out in best ball, it's easy to do this where you could even double tap those guys with where they go. Like you could get Warren, and honestly, 2 rounds later, you could tack on Njoku to go with it. But I'm even more open to that strategy in home leagues too, just because the way you really want to think about it is draft capital allocation. The positions you're spending the most draft capital on, meaning your early picks, you should spend less on later. Right. And so you've really opened yourself up to be able to do some things. And it's something that I wouldn't have recommended like probably 3 or 4 years ago. But you could take Tyler Warren and you could still get David Njoku if he falls in your draft, which happens. And it's fine if you have both of them, especially in a league where you can trade. Right. Because now if they're both playing well and you're like, wow, I just need one of these guys, I kind of got a wasted roster spot. You could trade them away. The other thing is where David Njoku goes in drafts right now compared to the wide receivers around him, there's also a chance David Njoku is just as good of a flex as like people are taking Christian Kirk and other guys like that in that range. So it's not like you're trading off like this massive wide receiver, this in a proven role over David Njoku. So I think there's a lot of ways like for you to kind of think about it. I'm not saying that's something that you deploy every single draft, but if the value is right on it, I don't mind doing that. And so that's something I've been a little bit more open to as well, even in home league drafts.
Yeah, and we've seen David Njoku as a 14-plus point per game player in offenses with Joe Flacco, with Jameis Winston. That's like a top 24 wide receiver. That's like Devontae Smith point per game range. So absolutely flex-worthy players. Last year in my home league, I drafted Trey McBride early, Brock Bowers late. Kept trying to trade one of them. Eventually, I'm just like, I'm going to fucking start both of them. Like, I'm just going to flex Brock Bowers.
And you felt fine about it.
Yeah, so these guys are definitely, when we're talking 9th-round pick, like, you're the wide receivers in that range. You may be getting Jordan Addison off the suspension, buying the dip on him, but maybe it's a Josh Downs, Jayden Reed type guy. So it's not like you're making these amazing bets at wide receiver versus the tight end position. So I do like a double tap there as well. So let's talk just a little bit more about the projections and how you yourself are applying your projections to your draft strategy. And one question I wanted to ask is, are there any players where the projections are low on this guy and they're kind of telling you this guy's overpriced, but you're just like, you know what? My gut's saying something else. And I'm a thinker, but the gut's overriding this one. And I'm not expecting there to be many, if any. Is there any players where you feel like you're just kind of ignoring what the projections are saying?
Yeah, and it comes down to the second half stuff that you talked about. So a lot of the players will end up being rookies, right, or young guys. So RJ Harvey is one. If you look him in my straight up like half PPR per game projections, it's 10.1. We know J.K. Dobbins is also going to have a role. But once you plug him in, and in PPR, it's 11.4 fantasy points per game. But once you plug him in to the ceiling and floor model, it's 17 and a half PPR points per game as his ceiling. And he plays in a scheme with Sean Payton. We know loves to get the running backs involved. He has the ability to break the big plays. We've already seen that in college. So it's the type of profile that honestly just has a lot of outs. Number one, it could be this split backfield, and even it could be a slight lead to J.K. Dobbins, and he could still be good enough to still finish like as a top 18, top 12 running back. So we've seen this from guys like Devon Achane his rookie season, was in a part-time role. You still loved starting him every week. Alvin Kamara, when he was a rookie in a Sean Payton offense, guys, I think it was 120 carries or 130 carries, and the guy was still a top 4 running back that season. Not saying RJ Harvey is going to be Alvin Kamara, but I don't think you can dismiss it. They're a little different. Kamara's a better like second level route runner at this point in his career than where RJ Harvey is. But you have to remember that Sean Payton handpicked this guy. This is a guy that most people thought in the NFL draft community space, RJ Harvey would be a round 3 or 4 pick. Sean Payton took him in round 2. Okay. The teams tell you, guys, what they think about these players when they spend the pick, regardless of what we may have thought, okay? They're telling us this. And RJ Harvey, he's got this explosive skill set. So even if he's in a smaller role, he could pay off. But then to your point earlier, kind of back to our conversation about TreVeyon Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson, what if RJ Harvey by week 6 or 7 is getting 55% of the snaps, 60% of the snaps? It's so funny how quick people are to say that can't happen. Guys, it can happen. It's not even the projection and the median, which is why RJ Harvey comes out lower, but his ceiling and the outs that this man has, they're massive. It could be an injury to Dobbins. It could be outplays Dobbins and gets more playing time. It could be that they're both playing really well, and he's just awesome on the opportunities that he gets. So RJ Harvey comes out as the number 68 player on my board overall, just straight up projections for half PPR. I'm taking him before that. Like, I'm taking this guy easily in round 5 if he's there, depending on my build. Like, if all those other running backs we talk about, like, I hit a tier break, like, I'll take RJ Harvey in round 4 of a draft. We're not doing it on Underdog because we're drafting, like you said, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teams over on there and on DraftKings. So we're more likely to let it slide. But if I'm in a home league or I'm drafting in like a high stakes league and I'm looking at my team and I know that I want my running back 2, or maybe I've gone 0 running back so far, RJ Harvey's a name I really want to click on, and I don't mind reaching for him because of all the outs.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting that you compared him to potentially being like a Devon Achane, where you're seeing a lot of associations with Achane because he was a late round running back. I've seen this year's Achane is by Shaltutin. You're seeing that a lot. But yeah. I thought it was interesting that you compared Harvey to him because you do talk about the ability to, be a very efficient rusher. Harvey was very efficient as a rusher in his career. I believe he was over 6 yards per carry in his career. He was efficient as a receiver. Then we talk about H and the ability to generate targets. This is a guy, Denver 4th in running back targets last year. And what I love about Harvey is the discount you're getting in home leagues on ESPN and Yahoo versus like Underdog. He's a 4 or 5 turn pick on Underdog where it's kind of going in that Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker range. You turn over to ESPN Yahoo, this he's getting priced down. He's more in like the Pacheco, Pollard, Aaron Jones range, where he's going to the 5-6 turn instead of the 4-5.
And it's the uncertainty. Uncertainty makes people push these sort of players down in home leagues because they think that they want to aim for what they believe is the known commodity. The thing that people have to remember is the thing that you think is the known commodity quite often isn't. And so that's why the range of outcome stuff is really just so important whenever you think through the players. And it's interesting. I kind of, this weekend, like I saw like this whole thing on J.K. Dobbins is the starter in Denver, and he's going to play on he's going to play on third downs. And if he plays, and you have to pass block on third downs, like to play in Sean Payton's offense. And yeah, 3rd and long, but we've already covered this. 3rd and long is the least valuable snap for a running back in fantasy football. The most valuable snaps are if you're on the field inside the 5-yard line, right? Because you're getting a chance to score the touchdowns. But the second most important snap is when you're out there on the 2-minute offense. The third most important snap is if you're out there on a 1st and 10 or like a 2nd and 5. RJ Harvey's going to be in play for the 2-minute offense. He's going to be in play for 1st down and 10 snaps. He's going to be in play for 2nd down and 5 snaps. Those are the majority of snaps, guys. There's way more 1st down plays than 3rd or 4th down plays. Just think about the way that it works. So RJ Harvey, for me, like, I just see so many outs. And the funny part is I also like J.K. Dobbins at his ADP. I think J.K. Dobbins is also priced too low. He was going around 10 of drafts for a while. Now he's creeped up there in around 9. He's in that range with Jordan Mason, guys like that. And I think that's where J.K. Dobbins should go. The other nice thing here is Sean Payton is one of the few coaches, David, where we know we have seen historically he is capable of supporting two top 24 running backs in fantasy. Like, he's done it multiple times. So it's not the kind of guy where we have to look at it and be like, man, I got to get an outlier season here to even hit, even though outliers is really what we care about. That's how you win your league. But you don't even have to hit an outlier season for Harvey just to pay off the bet that you made, right? And not even necessarily you make a huge profit.
Yeah, and not every pick's going to be a league-winning pick. You look at the anatomy of a league winner chart in Ryan's league. A lot of the picks our league winners are coming inside the first 5 rounds. Like, most people are not drafting league winners in round 6, 7, and 8. It's just you don't have to draft a league winner in that range to win your league. So I agree. I think Harvey's a good pick. He's getting pushed down. And you talk about the way the narratives kind of get – you can cherry pick narratives, right? Like, we can talk about
it drives me nuts.
The 3rd down blocking, like
He can't block, man.
J.K. Dobbins can have those. You know who else might be in that role? Samaje Perine in Cincinnati. He might have those third and long blocking snaps. Nobody is using
For as
that
much
against.
as people, exactly, as much as people love Chase Brown, guys, he played on 34% of the long down and distance plays for the Bengals last year. And they don't hold that against Chase Brown, yet it's the immediate thing that gets referenced around RJ Harvey, who in your home leagues is going 4 rounds later. I can make a bigger argument that Chase Brown is steamed up, honestly, than I can for RJ Harvey being steamed up. Like I honestly think like RJ Harvey's price is probably more fair. It's not. I'm not saying don't draft Chase Brown, but he has some dead zone qualities and as a round 2 back. Okay, I mean the pathway is really clear for him to lead the way. He's a guy that I loved last year. He helped me win a lot of leagues. Chase Brown, hat tip to you. I love you. You helped a lot of us make money last year when other folks were wanting, to draft Zach Moss. Like I really leaned more to Chase Brown. I covered some bases with Zach Moss, but mostly it was Chase Brown and it worked out. So your point on the cherry picking, so I do a new series now over at Fantasy Life. It's called Talk Data to Me. I've done 4 episodes so far. Last week, I had JJ Zacharyson on. We talked about draft strategy stuff. This week, it's so funny you brought this up, but I'm going to have Ian Hartitz on the show, and that's going to be our topic. That's going to be our topic, is this cherry picking, of these different data points to where it's like the human resources meme, right? It's like Chase Brown, who cares if he gets long down and distance snaps? And then the RJ Harvey one below is RJ Harvey's not going to get long down and distance snaps. It's like human resources, it's like, but Chase Brown, oh, you're so cute. And people do this all the time. And that's kind of the point, I think, of like the way you work through your process, why I work through the process like that I work through is honestly to not try to be right, but to try to break myself away from those things, because we all have our biases. We all get caught in the echo chamber of Twitter, and really the data can help us find the edges where we should say, you know what, let's just hang on a second. Maybe we need to rethink this. And RJ Harvey's a great example versus Chase Brown. So great pull by you.
Yeah, I do think you could make a case against Harvey, but it would be more so Dobbins stealing a large chunk of the rushing work. If you're making that case against Harvey based on long distance passing down, like it just has to come from a narrative that is
or it could be
actually
Sean
supported by
Sean
data.
Payton using a third running back. Like he's done that in the past. Like there are ways that RJ Harvey misses, but worrying about pass pro is not the one that you should be, running down.
And you want an example, a perfect example of that blowing up in your face? It would be Bucky Irving, because I was on the wrong side of the Bucky Irving debate last year. He was a guy who I liked him pre-draft. I liked the tackle breaking ability. I liked the receiving ability. But then we had the combine, and I got suckered in just like 90% of the other people who faded him. And, I was worried about the lack of athleticism, the lack of size. Oh, he also can't pass block. Who gives a fuck? Because look at Bucky Irving. He can run the goddamn ball. He's got good receiving ability. They're not putting him out there to pass block on these long. They got Rachaad White for that. But it didn't matter because Bucky Irving, A, can be an efficient rusher. B, he has receiving upside. And C, it was a good offense, Tampa Bay. Denver looks like they could be a good offense again. Bo Nix takes another step this year. If the wide receivers are good, they added Evan Ingram. That could be a good offense for RJ Harvey. Again, like Miami, nobody knew the Achane breakout of that. Miami was going to be as good as they were. So a lot of it comes in.
So just look at the last. So here's the last 3 years, the top 12 running backs. Here are the number of them to reach just 50% of basically the pass pro snaps out of the top 12. In 2024, 6 of them did. So 6 of them didn't. Like it's a coin flip here, guys. 2023, 7 of them got to the 50%. Again, a coin flip. 2022, 6 of them got to the 50% mark as far as being the pass pro back. Okay. So it's a false narrative. It's a false narrative. And if you're falling for it, you're just leaving value on the table. Would we prefer they get those touches or those opportunities as well? Sure. But there's like 6 of those guys. And they're all
I would prefer LaDainian
rounds.
Tomlinson, who plays 110% of offensive snaps.
Yeah, people came back to me and they're like, man, I'll just take Bijan. I'm like, dude, Bijan's in round 1, man. He plays all the downs. We know that. We're not talking. This is not an apples to apples comparison whenever we're looking, at these guys. But I mean, you gave really good examples there. And so it's just the way I look at it is pretty simple. Like if you have a player that's good in pass pro and they're also a good receiver, great, you're golden. They're probably going to be out there on all those plays. You got a guy that's really good in pass pro, but they're kind of a meh receiver. They're probably getting overvalued in home leagues by this plays in pass pro narrative. You got a guy that's bad in pass pro, but they're a really good receiver. They're probably getting undervalued. They're getting pushed down by this pass pro narrative. So that's not always the case. You have to look at ADP. You take everything into context. So it's a very interesting topic of conversation, especially, and this is just one example that we can use of the cherry picking stuff. It was with Achane last year. People were like, man, he's never going to get the carries inside the 5-yard line. He's too small. Oh, really? Well, he had 70% of them last year after you said he couldn't. That's why range of outcomes are so freaking important, guys. Just because he had 35% of them in year one doesn't mean he's going to get. James Cook will never get the carries inside the 5-yard line. Oh, he won't? Well, he led the Bills last year with Josh Allen in the carries inside the 5-yard line. We do this over and over and over, and continually it gets proven wrong.
And I'm guilty of the James Cook one, so I'll take the L on that one. But if you do not have this on your sheet for your next week, I want you to add it. We talk about the blocking and the narratives, the false narratives. I want you and Ian to also look into blocking for tight ends, because me and Andrew Cooper, who was on the show last week, we did our meeting of the tight end minds, and we talk about how people love to make the case for blocking tight ends. Oh, he can block. He's going to be on the field. That means he's a good target. Not really. A lot of the times it means he's losing pass snaps. He's not going to hit the route participation he needs. Like Adam Troutman was a guy years ago. They're like, Adam Troutman, he can block. He's going to start.
For tight ends, all you care about is route participation. You do not care about snaps. It doesn't matter. You just want the guys that are going to be on the field and pass downs. They're going to be out there to catch passes. But yes, that's another great example of where people get this wrong.
Yeah, when you talk about another one who came to mind was Elijah Arroyo, AJ Barner. Everybody's freaking out about AJ Barner getting the blocking snaps. Then Coop's like, he's just Eric Sauber, and then I look up Eric Sauber, and he's got like 400 offensive snaps last year. I'm like,
and he scored like 2 fantasy points.
Yeah, and it's like everybody's freaking out over Elijah Arroyo because Seattle's got Eric Sauber out there for 6 preseason snaps with the starters, and all of a sudden now Elijah Arroyo's just dead. So it's just crazy the way we go from, Fant gets traded, Elijah Arroyo to the moon, one little narrative, which isn't even based in, reality. You look at A.J. Barner's target earning non-existent. All of a sudden, Elijah Arroyo is dead to the world. So it's just crazy the way we make these massive swings, a lot of times based on single narratives, which might not even be backed by the data. So it's funny. We're at 1 hour exactly, so I want to finish up with two more questions.
Can go rapid fire. Let's do it.
The last two, I just want to know, who is the best pick in 2025 via Dwain McFarland's projections? And also on the flip side, who is the worst pick? Who's the projection saying, do not touch this guy with a 10-foot pole attached to a 10-foot pole. Stay away.
Well, I'll start with that one. It's Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, and guys, look, I love Garrett Wilson. And you heard us talk a lot about talent being the thing that can unlock, right, players. And Garrett Wilson definitely has that. The problem is you have to look at outliers where we've got a long history. And Justin Fields is an outlier bad quarterback as far as passing the ball. In the games where he's had 90% of his team's plays over his career, so not coming in as a backup, subbing in, not you had a package of plays, not you played the beginning of the game and you got hurt. These are his full games. He's averaged 180 yards passing. That's terrible. That's absolutely freaking terrible. And the catchable ball rate is the next thing, okay? And that ties into his inability to pass for a lot of yards. The catchable ball rate is a major predictor in fantasy football success, especially in season. It's a key component of the utilization score over at fantasylife.com. And Garrett Wilson would be fine if people would chill on him, but people are taking a player in round 3 that I think is they're taking him as a mid-range wide receiver 2. I think his median outcome this year is a mid-range wide receiver 3, and his floor is a wide receiver 4. And that's just the reality of the situation. I've gone back and compared players that play on teams like this, and I've even given Justin Fields some credit. I gave the Jets 200 yards passing per game, guys. 20 yards over where Justin Fields is, because the way my model works, there is some regression to league averages. I use the players last season, their 3-year average, and depending on their age, and there's some stuff that moves down, but then also just the starters in the NFL over the last 3 years. And the big challenge here is that, even if I give him that extra 20 yards per game and I go back and I look at players that played on teams that get as many targets as Garrett Wilson does, there's only one that ended up as a wide receiver 2, and it was Vincent Jackson. There's a laundry list of good receivers that earned a ton of targets in this kind of offense that were wide receiver 3s. So Garrett Wilson falls in your draft and you get to take him as a wide receiver 3, fine. Garrett Wilson, you taking him as a wide receiver 2, the chance of him finishing as a wide receiver 1, I would say like it's almost non-existent this year.
Yeah, I think I agree. A lot of people aren't going to like that as the worst pick, but round 3, I don't even like taking them in round 4. We're taking all those running backs, Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall.
I'm with you.
All those guys. A lot of people will point to DJ Moore.
It sucks for Garrett Wilson, guys. It sucks to play with Zach Wilson, and then you finally get Aaron Rodgers. He gets hurt. Then you finally get Aaron Rodgers. Not that Aaron Rodgers is great, but he's good enough to feed a wide receiver. And then they trade for Devontae Adams. He's had a bad run out, and he's a good player. Right? If you put Garrett Wilson playing with Josh Allen, we would not be saying this. So don't take this as a knock on Garrett Wilson. It's an outlier bad situation when we talk about the quarterback. And if you think about the Jets, what's the best way, David, for them to really win? They need to run a balanced offense. They need to try to play defense. They need to try to run the ball and win through less passing volume as well. And guess what Justin Fields also does? On those dropbacks, a large percentage of them turn into scrambles, which takes away chances for you to get targets. So he's going to have a big target share of a not very big target share pie from a guy that can't complete passes. So bad news.
Yeah, and everyone points to DJ Moore's season in Chicago, but even you look at that season outside the top 15 in expected points per game, a lot of it came in one big week. Yep. And then you talk about the passing volume. I mean, shout out Coop for the last episode. If you guys want to go back and listen to that, we'll talk about Mason Taylor. We're going to Mason Taylor rant. And we have very little faith in his ability to demand targets. We talked about his career 1.1 yards per route run. The guys in that bucket in the top 4 dynasty tight ends, it was like Brenton Strange, Dalton Schultz, Dawson Knox. It's basically
I took in my home league, dynasty league, I took Harold Fannin over him. It was tight end premium. I just straight up took Harold Fannin right over Mason Taylor.
Yeah, the profiles could not be further apart in terms of target earning ability at the collegiate level. Obviously, we had some level of play influences there, but they got God knows what at wide receiver 2 through 5. They got 2 good running backs, a rookie tight end. They're going to run the freaking ball. Like Garrett Wilson is facing monumental odds to pay off of round 4. He's this generation's Terry McLaurin, where we love the talent, but we're just going to be too high until he gets his Jayden Daniels. I don't think Justin Fields is going to be his Jayden Daniels. So
to answer the second half of your question, there's a lot of receivers that fit the bill. Now, again, this doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be league winners for you, but I think there's a lot of wide receivers in this range. So Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle. Devonta Smith, guys, has been a wide receiver 2 in a run-heavy offense where he has A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert to deal with. But people are also not thinking of the contingency upside. What if A.J. Brown misses time? We know the Eagles have to regress some to throw a little bit more this year. In the games without Dallas Goedert, he's even better. So, I'm not saying Devonta Smith's a guy I'm going out of my way to target, but he just falls down the draft board, right into your lap, in rounds 5 and 6 of these drafts. Rounds 5, 6, and 7 are crammed with these wide receivers. Jalen Waddle, a guy that's looked really more, his underlying data points has looked more like a wide receiver 1 most years. He's been a wide receiver 2 pretty much every season. Was a wide receiver 1 technically in his rookie season, but the way I do it is looking at 16 fantasy points per game or better in a PPR. He was slightly below that, but a wide receiver 2 every year. And then he, in the whole Dolphins offense, has a bad year last year. Jameson Williams. People are now he could be a league winner because people are so stuck, man. Where are the targets going to come from? Well, let me ask you this. Where you're getting him, does he have to get more targets to just pay off the draft capital you put in him? The answer is no. But what if Jameson Williams, who was hurt his first year, his second year was suspended in a doghouse, his third year he finally gets to play, and he has a pretty good fantasy season? What if this is a player that's still ascending? You're going to feel terrible if Jameson Williams does show up with a 25% target share this year. I'm not saying it's happening.
I will feel terrible because I have very little Jameson Williams.
Right. And it can happen. Xavier Worthy's another one. George Pickens is another one. All of these guys, and it depends on the site you're on, like where there's just a massive sweet spot to circle back around and get your wide receiver 2 or 3, sometimes your wide receiver 4 later in these drafts. So those are the guys that the projections, are higher on, that a lot of people are just, they're not taking in that range of the drafts. And honestly, it all comes together because of what you mentioned earlier, and it goes back to the draft strategy guide as well that I put out. Is we want those running backs, and going back to Ryan Heath's article around the anatomy of a league winner, we want those running backs, especially this year in rounds 3 and 4. And the fact that you can still come back and get this group of receivers, even if Jamo's a guy you don't like, there's so many others that fit in that range that are just falling too far down the draft board just based on projections.
And we're going to diverge a little bit in thinking here because the wide receivers you named, I do feel they are contingent bets. Wide receiver 1 contingent upside, Devontae Smith, Jaylen Waddle, Jameson Williams. But to me, those guys are all contingency bets. In order for Devontae Smith to be that league winner in that range, I really need A.J. Brown to suffer a serious injury. I need him to be out.
But you're not,
or I need Philadelphia to go way up. But in order to him to hit 16, 17 plus points per game, I really feel like I need that. Same with Tyreek Hill. I really feel like I need him to be out for Jaylen Waddle to hit that. Jameson Williams, I don't see any chance of him coming to Amon-Ra St. Brown's top role. I need Amon-Ra St. Brown to be out. Guys who I feel like are less contingency bets in that range number one would be DK Metcalf, who I know people don't like Aaron Rodgers at this stage of his career. They feel like he's washed up. They feel like he's way past his prime. I still look at Aaron Rodgers as a guy who can feature his wide receiver 1. I look at what he did with Devontae Adams last year. Devontae Adams was a top 8 wide receiver in points per game. In this same time frame, Garrett Wilson also averaged 14 points per game. I'm talking from week 7 on, once Devontae Adams was traded to this team. So Aaron Rodgers, he can get his top wide receivers the ball. There is no other top wide receiver in Pittsburgh but DK Metcalf. When we talk about Van Jefferson, Robert Woods is the only other wide receiver. 33-year-old Robert Woods, the only other wide receiver on this team who has caught 50-plus receptions in a season. So I see an ability for DK Metcalf with no other injuries on his team, no contingent, just to be hyper-targeted by Aaron Rodgers. And we've seen him produce 17 points per game before. We've seen him put up a top 10 wide receiver finish.
No, I like the DK Metcalf call.
So he would be my guy.
You asked about projections, and projections you said projections, not my rankings, not the guys I'm drafting, just to be clear. Fair. So I have DK Metcalf in that range, but if you have, and here's the other thing, you also have to remember, no, he's right there in that range with those guys. Metcalf's in the same range with those guys, and I agree with everything you just said. But you do have to remember, like back to the league, the anatomy of a league winner, right? We've got much lower hit rates in these ranges. So some of it is just getting players that you know are going to score you fantasy points. If you want the ones that I think could break your league in that range, Tet McMillan's one of them. Xavier Worthy is one of them. Like, in those guys, because like they're young ascending talents. Tet McMillan easily is going to lead this team in targets. I don't have any question about it, guys. I know he's a rookie, but like it's happening. The guy's he's a good collegiate prospect. We had, Bryce Young get a little better down the stretch last year. Xavier Worthy, even if we have Rashee Rice get a shorter suspension than we think, it's freaking Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Like, if there's an offense that can come out and suddenly just click and support 2 really good wide receivers, Xavier Worthy's on that list. Travis Hunter's also on the list. Like, people just are so worried about the defensive snaps. It's the number 2 pick overall in the draft. They've mostly used him on offense so far. This preseason, I see the camp report stuff, snaps on defense, snaps on offense. Guys, come on. He has to practice both positions no matter how much he's going to play on either side of the ball. He may play 30% of the snaps on defense. He still has to practice defense a lot for them to be able to trust putting him out there. So I wouldn't worry too much about that signal. Another guy that kind of fits more in like the territory that you're talking about with Pickens, like, is Calvin Ridley. I mean, he's also kind of the clear guy in Tennessee. He's an older player, getting up there. He's never been an elite player, but you get an upgrade in Cam Ward. It's going to be better than Will Levis, guys. Like, it's going to be better than Mason Rudolph, even if we get a struggle bus season a little bit from Cam Ward. So, yeah, agree with you on DK Metcalf. I just think in that range, getting players that have been good wide receiver 2s, like 3 out of 4 seasons, is not a bad thing when you also, on top of that, get a contingency bet.
Yeah, I like those guys in that range. So I think another guy who we have to mention would be Rashee Rice. I'll take the other side of that, Worthy, Rice. debate, I would take Rashee Rice over Xavier Worthy. I think I just have a lot more.
I would take both.
Well, that's a fair response too. I have just more confidence in Rice's target earning ability. There's a lot of red flags in terms of Xavier Worthy's rookie season. You talk about the PFF grading, you talk about the yards per run. When you don't really look at the playoffs, you just look at the regular season. He really wasn't good until those last.
I don't know why
games.
we would do that though. I don't know why we wouldn't look at a second half breakout for a player like that. We see it all.
I think we would look at both.
Receivers.
Well, I will say this: I am as big as an Xavier Worthy fan as the prospect as you will find, but I think just beyond looking at just the splits, you can look at his reception perception profile, and that's also going to include his full season. Matt Harmon is not just disregarding the playoffs, but Xavier Worthy has a lot of red flags in terms of his ability to beat man coverage, his ability to beat press coverage. He's like below, I think, 33 percentile in both of those. So I have some questions about what happens if Rashee Rice is back. Where do those manufactured touches go? I don't know that we're going to see as many to Xavier Worthy. Again, Andy Reid's a great schemer. He will still get some. But I do have some concerns about if Rashee Rice doesn't get a major suspension. What if Xavier Worthy's the number 3 target behind Travis Kelce? I don't think Kelsey's completely washed. So I'm a little more concerned with Worthy there. But I do think he's a okay pick in that range. He does, especially if Rashee Rice is out. He does take a step forward from that second half of his season. He's got elite speeds. We talk about the uncatchable targets. So he was getting targeted downfield and had a very low, deep catchable target percentage. So we see some correction to the mean on that. I do think he has a lot of big play upside. So I'm not fully out against Xavier Worthy, but I would say I'm a little bit more concerned than you.
Yeah, I would say Xavier Worthy's profile is actually really similar to Rashee Rice. Another person that's not big in reception perception, that's based around schemed up touches, but you like him. It's the same
Rashee
stuff.
Rice was a 99th percentile zone beater against zone coverage and reception.
Against zone coverage, which Xavier Worthy can easily be as well. Being a zone beater is not that hard. He's also a young player.
That's
right?
True.
I mean, you're talking about a guy that
but
once
that's a projection. Rashee Rice already was 99th percentile. I don't have to project
either way,
that lead.
You're talking about a guy that once he got into a full-time role, just like Rashee Rice, it took until week 14 of his rookie season. People forget that. Xavier Worthy, once he took that role over, 19 fantasy points per game, 25% targets, 21% air yards, 2.13 yards per route run. There are a lot of good things to like about that profile. And we can't think of a player as being static. That's a rookie. These players progress from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. And if I go back to his collegiate profile, Xavier Worthy burned man coverage across 3 years of college data, not just a sample of games that got looked at. So, yes, I love Matt Harmon. We talk all the time. I go on his show. So I totally lean to him on the film watching, side of it. But I think when you look at Xavier Worthy's price in home leagues, where you're having to take him on an underdog, I think you're correct. There's a lot more risk. People are taking Xavier Worthy at the beginning of round 4 on underdog. They're not doing that in home leagues. That's not the case. So we're talking about guys that you're getting later in your draft that can give you massive upside. Xavier Worthy definitely checks a ton of boxes, and he only got better as the season went on.
Yeah. I do think we have to project improvement again, but we're projecting improvement from a 638-yard baseline. So he's got a lot of ways to go just to become a 1,000-yard receiver. Never mind a true league winner. So I'm not going to hate him, but I'm certainly not going to love Worthy. I'm planting my flag on Rashee Rice. But anyways, Dwayne, that was a great show. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to have to hold you at gunpoint to come on again for sure. We learned so much from you today. Make sure you guys are following Dwayne. I'm sure you are already if you're following me, but if you're not, I don't know what the hell you're doing. Make sure you go follow Dwayne on Twitter. It's literally just his name, at Dwain McFarland. As long
Pretty
as you
easy.
can
But
spell
DWAIN.
yeah.
DWAIN. It's a different spelling for Dwayne. So
yeah. And it's with a D. It's not like Seth McFarland. It's with a D, not an E.
I didn't create Spawn or draw Spider-Man. I'm not that good.
No, you're just doing way
no, I'm
more
thinking of
important.
Todd.
You're doing more important work, like giving us the
that.
best projections in the business. Well, it's more important to the listeners here, probably. I'll tell you that. So thank you again for coming on. I know we went 15 minutes over the expected time.
But no, it's good conversation, and it's always good to go back and forth. So appreciate you, man.
Thank you, man. Thank you again. Take it easy, guys. Go crush that draft season.